Welcome everyone to the panel for the Condor and the Eagle. I'm very excited to speak with our panelists today. I'm Priscilla Solis-Ibarra, Associate Professor in the Department of English. And what I'm gonna do is just introduce our panelists. I have a couple of questions, but I really hope that we get to hear from you in the audience, your questions in the Q&A, or the chat. We would love to see your questions too. One thing I want to say is that part of why we have these fabulous students here with us today alongside the protagonists from the film is that the organizers behind the film really urge us to include local frontline community members and leaders. And I thought, who better than to invite our own fabulous students. So these are two really great student group leaders that I've been getting to know this year, and so happy that they could join us along with Brian and Casey. So I'm gonna read the introductions and then pose the opening question just to get us going. Casey Camp-Horinek is a film protagonist, hereditary drumkeeper of the Women's Scalp Dance Society of the Ponca Nation of Oklahoma. Because of Casey's work, the Ponca Nation is the first tribe in the state of Oklahoma to adopt the Rights of Nature statute and to pass a moratorium on fracking on tribal lands. In addition to her leadership as part of the Movement Rights Board, Casey Camp-Horinek leads Movement Rights Ponca Rights of Nature program and co-leads Movement Rights Intertribal Rights of Nature, which has a really cool acronym, IRON, forums, connecting tribal communities across Turtle Island interested in or actively working on passing rights of nature into tribal law. Brian Parras, another protagonist from the film, is a Chicano from Houston, Texas, healthy communities organizer with the Sierra Club and co-founder of TEJAS, which is an acronym for the Texas Environmental Justice Advocacy Services. He is a longtime environmental justice advocate based in Houston, and he co-founded the Libro Traficante movement that I write about in my book, which was a movement for educational rights, Chicano educational rights across the Southwest and in response to legislation in Arizona. And he serves as an advisor to the Gulf Coast Fund and sits on the board of the Environmental Support Center. Brian was recently awarded a Gulf Coast Fellowship and has been working to help organizations use media for education, organizing, and advocacy. Lane M. Barrett is from the Salagi Nation of Oklahoma, belonging to the Anasahoe clan. She is the president of the Native American Students Association at UNT, where she is a junior studying cultural anthropology. She is an activist for Native American rights, and she works to raise awareness for murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, a movement that was mentioned in the film, and advocates for Native Indigenous friendly environments in higher education, starting with UNT. Josselyne Sibrian is a first-generation DACA student and a senior majoring in psychology with double minors in Spanish and political science at UNT. She is a student assistant at the Multicultural Center, which is where she's speaking to us from tonight. She organized the screening of the film and currently serves as president for the Latinx Hispanic Student Union, Eagle Dreamers, and a Fly Peer Ambassador. Thank you all for being here with us. I have a question, opening question for Casey and Brian, and then after that I'll have another question for the students. So this is a two-part question for Casey and Brian. First of all, if you want to add anything to those introductions, anything that I didn't mention that you want to make sure to include, that you're involved in, want to bring attention to, because I know things are always happening, especially with organizers and activists. And then could you give us an update on the actions that you're involved in today related to what we saw in the film?
Hello, Latia, Juzi Witike, Panka Abdi Manchte Panka, Oklahoma. Wahe Tamajik de Tinike Gankagiza Teati, Wibaha Ehe. My name is Judy, my Panka name. My colonized name is Casey Camp Hornick. I'm a member of the Ponca Nation of Oklahoma, and I'm always looking forward to these events, and I appreciate being here with you. Want to thank the water today for sustaining us and for making this connection that goes between all of us that are here. And I want to thank these young women and you for inviting us into your homes, your living rooms, your spaces to share this time. And, you know, there's so much more. I should tell you that my true title and being is that of a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, a sister, an auntie, a daughter, a granddaughter, a relation to all, and a survivor of forced relocation and relocation. And I serve as the appointed environmental ambassador for our nation right now, as well as on 6 boards of environmental causes that are happening, including movement rights, Women, Earth, and Climate Action Network, Earthworks, Water Protectors Legal Collective, and my son's group, Earth Rights Defenders. And that really doesn't say much, except that life is very busy at this moment, and that it's necessary for each and every one of us to be stepping into this accelerated moment of purification on Mother Earth, where she has demonstrated to us since the last time this film was put together, how quickly this purification is going to act and be. You know, with volcanoes and hurricanes, wildfires, tornadoes, and polar vortexes that are reaching down there. Things are accelerated because of human beings' behavior and our unraveling of the sacred web of life in our greed as a species, and in the way that we have unbalanced our manner in which we are supposed to live. As a response, then many of us who, you know, I say it every time we get a chance to speak, activist is really an overused word. What we are as people, as Indigenous people, as women, as human beings that have an understanding of the balancing and the rebalancing that's going on right now, is a responsibility and an honor to reintroduce the awareness of Mother Earth, Father Sky, and all of the inhabitants as equally as important as human beings find themselves. And if that's called activism, okay, that works just fine. But it isn't anything more than what we're supposed to be doing. And I think that if everybody everywhere would wake up just a touch, they talk about being woke these days, and it's a little bit over PC'd to me. It just means that you're behaving responsibly and that you're thinking of others. And I feel like that's kind of should be a norm, right? Anyway, good to meet you.
Thank you so much. Brian.
Whew, it's always difficult. Thank you for calming spirit, Casey. I know it's an honor, and yet it's oftentimes like feels like a burden too, because certain elements in society seem to be unable to learn, right? And you would hope that after generations and generations of attempts at being taught the right ways to live, that there would be some change. And so you're right, you're right. And I think, you know, the work that I've done since college, and I went to University of Texas in Austin, um, has been sort of reckoning with that responsibility, and you know, at times like fighting against it too, you know, not wanting to carry that, um, but feeling beholden to my family, and you know, my relatives, and also, you know, the journey helps you understand your own place in this world. And so the work that I've done has been mostly, you know, things that have impacted my life or my family's life specifically. And that, you know, has been environmental issues, but they aren't the only issues either. And I think that's you know, what we tried to explore in the film, and it's why I kind of gravitated to media work, because I enjoy hearing other people's stories and learn a lot from them. And I also, you know, helps me understand my purpose and my role, um, and figure out better ways of executing that responsibility that Casey is speaking of, right? So I I continue that, right? And right now I'm with the Sierra Club, which is a very, very old organization. Um, and when you find yourself in different places, you know, you always add to the work that you think you're going to be doing, because you got to make it your own too, right? Um, and so I find even you know, beyond the environmental and the political and the justice work, like the idea of relationships is probably, I think, the hardest part of just being. And it requires a lot of communication, and it requires a lot of intention and compassion. And so those are the things that I think are important, you know, whether you're in school, whether you're a teacher or a student, and whether you are a professional in any career, that that relationship is what is always broken, what always leads to problems, and the issue of power and control that goes with those imbalances. So I try to think about everything in that way, and it's what was taught to me, and what I've observed too in my elders and my family, and folks that I have felt confident in, you know, that they're doing good work, and stepping lightly on this earth with a good heart and a good soul.
Thank you both so much for those responses. Such rich commentary already. And I really love how you're both speaking to relationships and purpose and finding purpose, because of course, this is an event that is oriented to students. And students are often at that place where they are pursuing a path and constantly questioning and hoping that they're doing the right thing. And you're both offering this wonderful kind of guiding language of looking to relations, of thinking about webs of responsibility. But I wouldn't let, the faculty or staff that are tuned in here off the hook necessarily, because I think we're all at a moment in which we are looking to find our paths, find new paths, new ways to do things, or affirming in our existing relations to reorient to the ways of our people, and to uncover those relationships and those relations with our people and with our planet. Because of the pandemic, because of the summer of racial injustice awareness, that all of the protests from last summer, it really feels like a turning point. So I think that we're all looking for ways to orient and find our paths. So let me turn the conversation to the students with a question, similarly, a two-part question where I just want you to add whatever else that you might want to add to the introduction that I gave, and to give you an opportunity to highlight the groups that you're representing, the student groups, what your mission is, your history, particular actions that you're involved in that you want to bring attention to. Whoever wants to start first.
I will go ahead. Oseo, Dohiju, Dakwado, Hi'a, Lane, Osta, see you all. Good to see you all. Thank you for being here. Hello. They call me Lane. I'm glad to be here with everybody. I am the president of the Native American Student Association on campus. There's so much in and I think a lot of the Indigenous people here, especially on the panel, when I was watching this movie, this documentary, the whole time I was just thinking about responsibility, what we are called to do as Indigenous people, as protectors of the land. And when I think about that, my heart and my student org's mission and my mission, I think about our responsibility to educate the younger generation of Indigenous people. We like to talk about urban natives and joke around, but displacement is a big plague to Native youth. Not only that, but just the different plights that Native kids have to deal with. And so what my mission is, and what the student org's mission is to take these Native kids in higher education who've come through this huge process of, and in my personal experience, public schooling, all kinds of schooling, just the picking and the attempts to just remove culture to fit better into this lens that helps you succeed in an educational system. So you have these kids who are just filtered through, all these Native kids who are filtered through this system of oppression to get to college, and they come to us at NASA and they ask us, who are we? Where do we go? How do we decolonize? How do we reclaim our Indigenous identity? And so a big part of what we do is connect them to the Native community that's local. So NASA, Native American Student Association, you'll hear me say NASA a lot, not the space program. What we do is we take these kids and we connect them with the Dallas Indian community. We get them connected with aunties, elders, people who know the language, who can teach traditions, because we need to keep birthing the keepers of the earth and keep educating. it's a big part of what we do, and a big part of where our heart is making, fostering Indigenous identities from these higher ed Native kids, but also making these educational systems more Native friendly, safe spaces for Native kids, because if they even get to the point where they're in higher education, which is very rare, the likelihood of being welcomed in those spaces is even more rare. So what we're doing at UNT right now with Priscilla and a few others, we're trying to piece together scholarships, possibly. My student org, we're looking on doing homeland trips to get these Native kids back to their homelands, even if it is just for a little bit, just to find home, get back with their roots. Something that we've worked on as well is we got Indigenous Peoples Day declared on campus, which was a really big victory for us, as well as we're building a land acknowledgement for the Wichita and Caddo people, which UNT is built on Wichita and Caddo affiliated tribes' homelands. So we're just doing everything we can to decolonize. And that starts in our hearts as Indigenous people. That starts in ourselves. And so we take these kids and we're building these voices, because they have them, they just don't know how to reach them and how to decolonize themselves. So we're starting with them, and we're trying to build these leaders, because without the Indigenous voices being educated and able to rise up, then we're back to square one. I don't know where I would be without NASA and my personal journey in decolonizing and reclaiming myself and my Indigenous identity. So that's the spirit that we hope to continue on and keep for many, many generations that come through UNT, and many more Native kids that we reach and try to help. So that's what we do. Wado, thank you.
Thank you, Lane. One quick question. How long has your organization been around at UNT?
5 years, I think, technically, maybe 4 years. I came into it my freshman year of 2018 when we were just rebuilding. We had gotten our feet on the ground, and we had started doing work, and then all the people who built up the student org graduated, so it just died off again. So we pretty much started at square one. In 2018, I myself, Ruth Thunderhawk, who she's an amazing woman as well, she's graduating, we're gonna miss her, Millie Gaston and a few others, we all came together and we were like, what can we do to make this place one that welcomes Native kids? So yeah.
That's fantastic. I wanted to bring attention to that because you mentioned all of your projects, and I wanted to draw attention to the fact that you all have been doing that in such a short period of time. It's a wonderful accomplishment.
Yeah, about 4 years from getting everything collected and getting everything started again, claiming Indigenous Peoples Day, getting the land acknowledgement, working on scholarship funds. I mean, we hit the ground running as soon as we got our feet on there. So it's been an amazing couple of years of my life, I'll tell you that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lane. Josselyne.
Hi, so my name is Josselyne. I just want to thank everyone, obviously, for being here. I'm honored that I can be a part of this panel. So I am the president for the Latinx Hispanic Student Union. This is our second year being on campus, so we're still new, getting everything structured. With COVID, obviously, we've had our obstacles and it's been a little bit difficult, but I am very honored to be serving as president. So the mission and purpose of LHSU is to promote community outreach, cultural awareness, unite all our Hispanic Latinx orgs on campus as a way to unite. I just think that's just a more powerful thing to do, to see everybody united instead of separated and kind of doing their own thing. We also push our members in academics, professionalism, advocate for students, and then we hold like our monthly meetings. We have mentorship opportunities, and we do socials and community service. And so, like I said, it's only been like 2 years, so we're kind of like still struggling, obviously, because everything we've done has been through COVID. But now that we are kind of going back in person next semester, we are just focusing on finding that philanthropy who we're going to be serving to like in our community, whether it be like a small business or honestly just anybody that needs help or an advocate. But for me, like, there's a lot of the things that LHSU does represent is something that has helped me as not only a student, but as a person, I believe. I am a DACA student and a first gen, so coming into college, I didn't know what I was doing, filling out wrong paperwork, not knowing where to go. And luckily, here at the Multicultural Center, where now I work, I have gained a lot of skills, mentorship, and working with a lot of underrepresented communities that have now opened my eyes and going into higher education once I graduate next semester. So that is just a big passion and goal of mine, just to help underrepresented communities, because we really are struggling. But that's why I just think it's amazing to be here to collaborate with different cultures, different people, and everything as well.
Great. And about how many student orgs are under the umbrella of the LHSU?
So there's only like 14 Latinx Hispanic based orgs, but the ones that we collaborate well with about 6 of them. So it has been a great start. And so it's been amazing.
Great. Thank you so much for those answers. I have another question I'd like to pose. It's kind of a broad question, so wherever you want to sort of poke around in it. So the film is about deepening one's relationship to place, a homeland, a specific place. But it's also about forging coalitions that support a general agenda of abolition, or that's what I see happening there, right? The abolition of the use of fossil fuels, the abolition of heteropatriarchy with a focus on women, abolition of capitalism, of borders, and all of those projects, of course, relate to the abolition of police and prisons that we've been hearing about so much over the past year. So, you know, a range of questions that occur to me in relationship to these themes of both place and abolition. Through what actions do you deepen your relationship to place? Because we see that a lot happening in the film. Or how do you see your relationship to, or your group's relationship to, these agendas of abolition? How do they connect up? Or another question that we could consider too is how do you forge coalitions across different groups? Because that's a big part of what we see happening in this film. So I'm just kind of throwing out there a range of questions just to engage on this theme of both place and abolition.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead. I claim this elderness all the time, so you guys can just get used to it. First of all, Priscilla, I really want to thank you for your thoughtfulness and your insights and your ability to go to the strength of everyone and to also uplift the questions that need to be asked. I'm hearing so much here that is really exciting to me and repetitive to me at the same time. The young ladies are remarkable. I'm just really proud of them. I hear a lot about education, and I want to remind all of you that education comes in many forms. Education within the system that you're working is both gratifying, necessary, and absolutely unnecessary and totally ungratifying, because it does remove you from your roots and try to put you into this linear expectation that has been what is cause of the problem that we're in right now. So I think that both of you guys are doing extraordinary work in not buying into that. I see you in your resistance in a very strong way. And I really, really want to let you know that I appreciate you. And I also want to encourage you not to be part of the brain drain from our communities. because that's where we lose our people so many times, is into this educational system. Once you become what you want to be, then where do you go and how do you use that is really important to me as a grandma and a great grandma, and as someone who loves you already and wants you to be back in your communities, teaching and doing and upholding your traditional ways. I also want to remind you, what is that prophecy that is within the name of the film you watched? It is the condor and the eagle. It is the eagle and the condor. And I'm seeing the eagle and the condor and the condor and the eagle sitting there in front of me right now, just like Brian and I. He identifies as Chicano. During that time of our initial resistance, not initial, continued resistance in the 60s and 70s when I was young. And we were not just raising our voices, but raising our fists, raising our guns. Now, we were peaceful and spiritual, but boy, we sure had some folks coming at us and very not that way. And one of the places that our people ended up is in Wounded Knee, South Dakota in 1973. And the main people that made the connection with us, that has made lifelong relationships with the Chicanos, coming from all over the United States, all over Turtle Island, to unite with their roots and to unite with the indigenous peoples of North and South Americas, because we didn't believe in those borders. We had no concept of ever upholding that nonsense. And it has enriched us all to the degree that you see in the condor and the eagle, the kind of relationships that when we go to the United Nations now and we go to the climate talks, we have relatives from the very tip of Chile up to the Arctic Circle and around the world with other indigenous people, because we recognize the strength in the unity of those of us who still have the genetic and cultural memories, the storytelling that is essential to us as survivors and as people intact spiritually, whatever form that takes. So I'm so glad to know how to say Latinx, for instance. I've been wondering, I see that word all the time, but I was wondering, is that proper? You know, where do I come from? I'm Ponca. I'm indigenous. I have been called Native American. I've been called American Indian. I've been called prairie nigger. And when I was a little girl, I've been called an Indian. You know, I'm Ponca. Ponca abadi. Ponca wa'u. That's who I am. And yet I am also just bone part of the earth. And as one of Earth's children, it's necessary for the alliances to be built from that point so that we have a place for our children to be. When I see you having separate classes or organizations, I got so excited. So when are you guys coming together? You know, when is that Latinx and that NASA group going to meet together and explore the depths of your traditional stories and your roots? Because both sections of us have been colonized, us by those Europeans from, you know, that are English speaking or whatever they speak. And then south of that medicine line down there, they speak a different colonizer's language, you know, called Spanish. Yeah, right? We're all the same. You know, we don't have that separation unless we give it that power. So I'm just grandmaing you into telling me when you meet together. Give me that update next.
Thank you, Casey. Lane, I think you were going to jump into the conversation.
Yes, I want to say, Wado, Casey, thank you. Encouragement from elders and is basically the only thing that I ride off of. You know, I'm always one to sit and be quiet when the elders are around, and I retain and I absorb everything that you say. And I appreciate your words. I appreciate you being here. There has been a few times where NASA's worked with different Latinx student orgs, but I don't think we've ever really came together and seen what we can accomplish as whole. You know, I've at this point I don't even know what I was going to say. Could you repeat the question? I'm sure it'll come back to me.
Yeah, and any way that you want to talk about that kind of coalition building, or how you affirm relationship to place, or your relationship to these agendas of abolition that I saw throughout the film.
Yes, thank you. I did speak a little bit about it kind of in my introduction, but the importance of, and Casey spoke about it as well a little bit, the importance of not allowing the educational system to stomp out the education and the reclaiming that we need, because Casey's so right in the fact that there are parts of, you know, college and the education systems that will help prosper us as far as this colonial world that we live in, but how does it prosper you as a person, you know, as an Indigenous person, reclaiming your identity? It's really where all of our heart lies at NASA. We've had elders come in our meetings and teach us how to make ribbon shirts, which are pretty traditional to a lot of the Southern tribes. Teach us how to do that, you know, different ceremonies, because it's just about fostering. And if you can reclaim your Indigenous identity and who you are, and relearn and decolonize yourself, you'll be able to find place anywhere. You know, one of my elders, Annette, would ask me all the time, have you had ceremony today? And when I was younger, I didn't understand what she meant. I was like, what do you mean? Like, did I burn today? Did I sage today? Did I pray? And she was like, no, did you go outside and stand there and just reconnect? Did you do that? And it's things like that that I wouldn't have even thought of. But it's all of this is our place as Indigenous people. There is not one specific homeland that we're called back to. You know, there are roots to us that are familiar and that know our tongue and know our name. But all of this is part of us. So when you can reclaim your identity, you can reclaim every space that you come across, every plant, every animal. It's all part of who you are. And when you're Indigenous, we say all the time, it's not just an identity. It's not just who you are. It bleeds into every facet of your being, your existence, how you walk, how you talk. It changes everything. And so when you relearn that, you learn what place means. As far as things that me and Josselyne could do to come together, I think that the possibilities are really endless. You know, in the Dallas Indian community, there's a lot of different tribes that come together. And I know, depending on different Latinx tribes that might be shown through in your student org, I can tell you right now that I know people that I could reconnect those Indigenous people with. You know, I could absolutely help in any way I can. I know enough people, you know, Indian country, you know, you say one thing and it gets everywhere. It's somehow very small and very big at the same time. So I know pretty much everyone in the Dallas community. So there's so much that we could accomplish together. And I think that this documentary has inspired me a lot, to reach out and figure out how we can help each other, not just about, you know, how can the Native, you know, just us and the Dallas Indian community, what can we do, but how can we all prosper together, and the people that have been crippled by colonization, because colonization isn't just, and it talks a lot about it in the film, it's not just, you know, settler colonialism. You know, there's resource colonialism, there's economic colonialism, there's so many different kinds that so many different communities have been affected by. And just, it definitely opened my eyes a lot to different ways that we could serve each other. So yes, although that's what I had to say about it.
Great. I think that Josselyne, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say again, thank you to Casey. Your words inspired me and really empowered me. Because you do have a point of just getting lost sometimes in the education. So I was originally born in El Salvador, but I grew up in a very conservative town, and I came to the U.S. when I was 2. So I now looking back at it, it is crazy how much the education system does hide from you, especially people that have been oppressed or criminalized or honestly just been hurt. And then just coming into college, I feel like I kind of found my identity once I found people that look like me, once I found that Hispanic community, because I came from a conservative town, didn't really know anyone, couldn't identify myself as even a DACA student until coming into college. And so it is just finding that community, finding your place that not only empowers you, but just you learn more about other groups. And that's why I'm just honored again to be here, because I love advocating for all the under minority communities, and just to learn about it, to collab with different groups on campus and even outside of campus. It is powerful when you see what everybody can do. I know Latino communities sometimes just try to do their own thing and just, oh, like we'll do our own. And that is something I saw growing up, but it's like, no, we need to break that. Like we are all going through what y'all think are different things, but it all affects us in a way, one way or another. And I feel like a lot of people don't realize that. Um, and so again, thank you. And I think I answered the question kind of. I was like rambling off.
No, that's great. Fabulous. Brian, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate going last. Sometimes it's like a power move too, because you get to listen to everyone. But I've been taught very well by Casey in these conversations we've had to just sit there and smile and wait my turn. And my mom taught me before that. So I will always wait till I'm called on. But I think that's a very important question, and a very personal one, right? Like I think that hits at the core of like college experience, coming of age experience, um, and it all centers around belonging, right? And for communities who have been taught that we don't belong our whole lives, that can be even more difficult, because I think it's a part of coming of age for everyone to not feel like you belong. You're still discovering who you are, um, and making life choices, right? That will be things that, set in motion what you're able to do for the next 10, 20, 30 years. But for communities who have been completely bamboozled, and prevented from knowing who they are, it creates another problem. And so I know my generation was given more access to higher education, and my mom always pressed upon us that education was, your path to autonomy and freedom. um, and I know exactly what Casey's talking about, because I even felt this, at a very young age, that learning put you further away from your own parents' teachings. And it was a paradox, because your parents were telling you to go to school and to learn, and yet what you were learning was to disregard and in many ways disrespect your parents' teachings. And that can be a very difficult thing to process. And I think it's why so many of our youth do so poorly in school, because they can't. How do you push away your own, family's teachings? And you feel it, like it changes you, the longer you're stuck in it. And so really the tools for managing that, I think, are what I find are really important to teach our youth. Otherwise, they turn to, alcohol, drugs, gangs. They just turn to things that are there in front of them, which are further, exploitative um, means that the oppressor is profiting from. That's where they want us to go. And even professionally, right? You become doctors, lawyers, policemen, oil men, and those can be just as equally damaging to the soul, to your family and your community, and so in the process of learning, like we have to perform, we have to dance, we have to take the test, but we also have to figure out how to maintain our sanity and our connection to our own roots and culture. And so you have this like duality, right, of beings um, at the same time. And in my response, was certainly to come back home. Like I've felt that I didn't intend to stay this long. But as soon as I graduated from college, I did go back home, and I taught for 2 years. And despite the terrible, like, colonial oppressive schooling that I had, I do think like the teachers were good people, and and they cared for us, and I appreciated that. So I thought I need to give back and teach for a certain amount of time. I could only handle 6 months, y'all. And then I did administrative stuff in the schools, but I'm still here. And what I learned from that 2 years, were things that were impacting my ability to learn too. The environmental issues started to reemerge, and I saw a path. Right, I was like, okay, I'm really connected to this issue, not just in my lifetime, but my parents' generation, because of where they're from in West Texas, and like I care about this issue. I can put some real thought to this from a personal point of view, and I want to like help those who are continuing to suffer from the assault of chemicals and air pollution, and in the culture, right, of the petro state. So that's kind of where I felt like I could contribute. So coming back is important, but knowing how to maintain, the important things that your parents and your elders have given you, um, and utilize the tools, right, of this system, of this government, um, of all of the academic knowledge that you've gained. Like use it. um, and what I found is that even in the organizing, right, like you have to resist. So I've been participating in things and trying to find new ways of resistance as well. And I'll just name one because Sarah mentioned it last night, and it's the peace and dignity journey. um, and just running, right, the idea of just running, because this city has these huge marathons, and it's become like a commercial um, competition where folks from all over the world come to compete, and they want to be the first one to pass the finish line. It's like, and they've totally stripped running's like spirit and purpose, and turned it into like a game. And it's sponsored by oil companies, but yeah, like just being able to then see the veneer, right? All of the falseness, the fakeness, that exist. Like that's what you get from continuing to resist, and understanding, the systems that are preventing you from knowing who you are. Um, and that's empowering, very, very, very empowering. You don't feel so assaulted all the time because you can see it. right? And you learn those skills to just push it aside.
Thank you. I really appreciate how you're all bringing attention to the roots of the university are deeply set in the colonial and capitalist project, and the extent to which we can all have an awareness of that, approaching the system, being in the system, distancing oneself from the system. And a lot of what we're talking about here is creating spaces of fugitivity where we create pockets of empowerment amongst ourselves, with each other, in coalitions, within our groups. I certainly try to do that in my classes, and I know that many colleagues on this call supporting this film try to do that as well. But the student groups are so important for that project, definitely. There are a couple of questions that came in through the chat, so I want to make sure to get to those. One of them about the film. I appreciated the way several of the scenes in the documentary featured protests incorporating a martial rhetoric, like pipe bombs in pipelines in song lyrics, or warrior up, etc., while clearly focusing on the creation of peaceful relations between Indigenous communities so as to resist extractivistic policies that do violence to those communities. While I believe peaceful means of protest vital and necessary, employing a rhetoric of actively fighting seems equally vital, but also a tricky tightrope to walk in today's media atmosphere. I'm just curious about what thoughts you might have about this.
It seems like we've set up a little pattern of how we're going to do this. I just wrote down spaces of fugitivity. I really like that. I think I may be living in one during this COVID time, but I'm kind of liking the idea of saying that again. So you may see it's all over the place. Again, I'm going to say that I'm not real crazy about this getting so excited about language. I say warrior up all the time, and I mean it to the depth of my spirit. I have never lifted my hand in anger to another human being. I warrior up every day. 100%. I am a warrior in prayer. I'm a warrior in action. I'm a warrior for my family, my people, and my earth. And I don't have any reason to not say that. I think that if we are going to use the language of the colonizer, that we have to find those areas like you just taught me, spaces of fugitivity, that fit our practices, our way, particularly I'm going to go back to Standing Rock as an example, was a way that we were brought there in prayer. We were asked by our host, the Lakota, the Standing Rock Lakota, the Hunkpapa, all of the Ocheti Sikung, that they wanted it that way. And of course, my sons were there first, right at the beginning, along with my Hunka daughter, my adopted daughter, Joy Braun. We were asked to come there in peace and prayer, and that happened. And even with the militarized police coming at us, it remained prayer and peace. Even as we were jailed and numbered and put in dog cages, even as dogs were set on us, we remained in prayer. And I think that we were warriors to the bone, every one of us, from the babyest one to the most elder, who was a woman that also was in Wounded Knee, which started as a prayerful place, by the way, a prayerful walk into Wounded Knee. And then Wounded Knee was surrounded again by the federal police, who started shooting. There were arms there, and that happened. There was people killed, and it's happening every day on the streets. But you'll find that within the Indigenous movement and the movement of the people of color all around Turtle Island, that we're the ones who 99.9% of the time come in peace and in love and in a prayerful way for all of creation to be able to continue. So if the press might hear the word warrior up, good. Maybe they'll do a news article on it. Quote me.
That's great. Thank you, Casey. I also want to point out that fugitivity is not my term, a term that I learned from Black feminist writer Alexis Pauline Gumbs. So I really recommend her work.
Okay, I'm going to claim it then. No, I won't, but I kind of will.
Yeah, her book is Spill Scenes of Black Feminist Fugitivity from 2016. And then she has 2 other books that's part of a trilogy. Just amazing writing and so many beautiful ideas she shares with us.
Would you put her name in the chat so I can copy
Yes.
it down, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Does anyone else want to follow up on that particular question or another issue?
When I think of the phrase, warrior up, I do think of the continuous fight against colonialism. And I think it's so fitting because there is this continuous fight against colonialism because colonialism has been continuous. And I think what fighting looks like and what fighting back looks like is different in every setting. And I think that at this point, not speaking up and not educating yourselves and not reclaiming and decolonizing, that's not fighting, So every step that we take to reclaim is a step in fighting. And that is warrior up, putting beating on. I remember the first time I ever walked onto campus in full regalia, and I didn't, lay a hand on anyone. I just sat in my history class because we spoke about the Trail of Tears. And it was this white professor who was going to teach me about the Trail of Tears. I just thought it was really funny. And so I wore my entire regalia. I mean, all the way down to the shoes and the shawl and my terror dress. And I just sat there real quiet. And that was my biggest phase of, warrioring up. And like Casey said, I didn't lay a hand on anyone, but those are fights that you have to fight every day as an Indigenous person. And so I think that, that wording can be so applicable in so many different assets of our lives.
Thank you, Lane. Now I want you to take one of my classes so you'll come dressed up like that. All right, there we go. Warrior up.
I've definitely done it a few times, probably more than my professors would be very comfortable with. But when we got Indigenous Peoples Day declared on campus, I wore full regalia around. I didn't even have classes that day. I just walked around and hoped that someone would ask me about it so I could have a chance to teach them. But it was the most liberating yet terrifying experience of my life. Can you just imagine me just in full regalia on the UNT transit bus? I was just zooming around campus with my feathers and all. It was so funny. And I had lots of people take pictures and ask questions, but I've definitely shown up more than a few times in my regalia for class.
Great. There's a
thought to add
oh,
to
go
that.
ahead, Brian.
And it's just that, I think it's always, again, like you start to spot things as your resistance grows, right? And they're always gonna critique every part of our identity. You know, this headband is something that scares people and makes them think that I'm a gang member, and you know, could be enough for an officer to shoot me. Um, but it could be anything, you know. I think for Indigenous people, dancing, yeah, long hair, braided hair, like it doesn't matter. And so we have to remember that they're always going to have their own definitions for everything, um, including, you know, things that we know are peaceful. And I think the only other part that I will add is that the other part to that is that, you know, we're also people who will defend ourselves, right? And sometimes that does mean force, right? And we've seen that all across the globe, at times where that becomes necessary. And uh and and I think it's, you know, important not to let that um allow folks to then just identify any of our um cultural ways of being and be an pretext for violence, right? Because very infrequently, as Casey has said, have people of color, Indigenous people, been the inciters of violence. Um, and that's really important to understand, you know. And you can look at all those books behind you there, and you know, and see that that is true.
Yeah, I always find the question about violence so interesting, because of course the 500 years of colonization has been a process of physical, epistemological, and ontological, all of the above, violence. So of course, violence is part of the question, is part of the conversation, certainly. But we also have to think about who made the first move. There's a question directly for Brian. And I think this relates to still what we're talking about in terms of violence, experiences of violence through educational system. So bring us back to that epistemological violence. So for Brian, do you think that in a way it was good to go through the colonizer mindset with schooling for your understanding of self and your culture? So how was that part of your process, I guess?
I wouldn't call it good. I think it was more a strategic move, you know, made by my mom. Um, and I tease her. It's like, it's why, you know, I'm Brian, and my my dad and my mom disagree on what my second name is. My mom and my birth certificate say Luke, but my dad's always called me Lucas, and and so I think it's more, the question is, you know, what is your strategy for surviving? And my mom was picked on in school for speaking Spanish. She was like the only um, Mexican family in the school that she went to, and she's the oldest, so she was the first one to go through, you know, the educational system, um, and that leaves marks, right? That leaves marks on yourself, and any mother wants to protect their child, and it's a lesson too. It's like, oh, this is how my mother tongue was taken from me, you know. And I'm not talking about Spanish. You know, our indigenous languages were taken from us the same way, you know, with even more violence. And what else was taken from us? You know, it forces you to ask those questions. So good, I think I can operate in this world, um, you know, with more guided step, but I don't want to operate in this world, right? Like I want to have the world that that we choose to have, and I certainly would like to know more about the world that existed prior to colonization, and so that's something that we can look to the education system for, um, but it's not like you think, right? Because most books, are written from the perspective of the colonizer, and so it still just requires a great amount of detangling. Um, and as Casey said, like you got your elders, right? Talk to your family, talk to the folks around you, um, and you'd be
Let
amazed.
me just jump in quickly. Casey has to go, so I just want to say thank you so much. It's an honor to have you here with us.
Thank you. One of my many corny jokes is about BC, before Christ, before Columbus, before Cosner, before colonization, before. So before COVID, we would have done this in person. And I'm hoping that post-COVID, we will get that opportunity. And thank you all. I've learned so much tonight. And good night.
Thank you. Good night. I'm sorry to interrupt, Brian. I just wanted to.
Yeah, no, thanks for catching that. And
yeah.
And I think I was done. It's yeah. I the reason I say is because everyone has to figure out that answer themselves. I wouldn't take my experience or my mom's experience and say, okay, that's what I'm going to do with my child. Like, no.
I think that we have just time for one more question, and I think this is a great question to end on. Do you believe that we are slowly winning the war against harmful powers with nonviolence and unity across cultures, teaching each other our various warrior tactics? So maybe the other side of that, the coin of the previous question. So are we making some headway here?
I will just say, I believe so. A big thing that we talk a lot about in the Native community is just as important as the Native person is, so is the ally. Community and voices raising together, that's where the power comes from. That's real power. These machines and the guns and anything that can be used against us, that's not power. It's community, it's family, that's power. And those are the voices that will raise above and change the world. That's why we foster these Native people. That's why we keep teaching and keep growing and keep reaching out, because that's where the power is. That's where the real power is. So I 100% agree. I think that we've made a lot of strides as a community towards good, and I think that we have a whole lot to do still. But the more that platforms open up for us, technology, social media, the ability to tweet something and my tweet from my tribe is seen across, all over, Native Twitter is what we call it. That's going to be able to bring people together. And with that, we're going to be able to keep touching the world in different ways. So I believe so. I also believe that there's a whole lot left to do and a whole lot more allies that have to be placed all around, especially in the government, councils, all those things. We need Native voices everywhere, and we need allies everywhere. And the more that we grow together is the more power that we're able to accumulate.
And I want to completely agree with Lane, honestly. Of course, nothing can just change overnight, sadly, as much as we'd want things to just be fixed and bring peace to the world, I guess. But it is just that thing where it is just, especially I feel like our generation, or just maybe it's just me at UNT, I just see all these powerful student leaders and just having these big voices, which I'm so glad I can be a part of, because I see all the different views, different communities saying this is what we're struggling with, this is how we can fix it. And then just seeing everybody wanting to work together, or even if it's not the same cultural, just being aware like they're hurting, like we're hurting too, but we can help them, they can hurt us, or they can help us. And even if they don't help us, like we're still here for these people. And that's something amazing I've seen here at UNT, working a lot. Although we haven't unfortunately worked with NASA directly, we have worked a lot with the Black Student Union here, and everything going on. And it is just amazing just seeing our generation and just seeing this youth, I feel lately has just been so up in the media space, up trying to just fight the government and just have that justice, and that should have been here in the first place. And it's just kind of sad seeing people that are hurting having to fight for their voices, fight for their needs, fighting what was theirs in the first place, because we've been colonized. And back what Brian was saying, like my parents, they didn't want me, my Spanish is horrible. It's not the best. Just because they wanted me to learn English. They were like, they didn't want me talking about my documentation status. When I started doing it here in college, my mom was like, no, like, why are you doing it? Like, no one cares. And I was like, people care. Like, it's just, we have to make it aware. Like, once I was like opened up about my situation, students come to you like, I'm going through the same thing, or this and this. And so just using your voice, other people are going to hear and want to join you. And so I feel like slowly we are progressing. And hopefully I can see when, the world is happy and people are in peace, but we'll see.
Thank you both so much for those responses. I can't tell you how much it uplifts me to be around all these powerful, inspiring young people like you. It's a real privilege. It's the best part of my job. If I, I don't even call that part of it the job, right? It's when I have to go to meetings and fill out forms and stuff, that's the job part. But working with the students is really the best and so inspiring. So I would like to close this out with kind of a comment from another young person from the audience. Our colleague, Professor Calcaterra, is watching with her 5-year-old daughter, Calliope. And Calliope also wanted to pose a question. And I think that it's a good question. It's a good thought for us to carry with us as we consider, the younger generations, the ongoing generations, our relationship to all of the generations through thinking about our relations and spiral time, deconstructing kind of linear time, but really affirming spiral time orientation. So Calliope says, why do they dig up oil if it hurts the environment? And Professor Calcaterra adds, of course, a larger question here is finding ways to encourage our children to warrior up. And I think that that's a wonderful, thought to carry with us as we are creating spaces of fugitivity, of affirming our cultures, affirming what our parents taught us, that we bring to these spaces of academia, of responsibility rather than activism, right? Enacting our responsibility to one another and to the planet. I'm so grateful to everyone for joining this event. Brian and Liana for coming to UNT, and I look forward to bringing you in person when we can and screen the film again. And of course to Josselyne and Lane and to Casey off screen. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Have a good night.